Some men are so dangerous, the only thing that scares them is meeting their equal. In 1971, at a private party in Hollywood, the most feared boxer on earth walked straight toward the most dangerous martial artist alive. One was loud, confident, untouchable. The other was calm, silent, watching everything. Then one moment changed the entire room. A giant hand landed on a smaller man's shoulder. A smile appeared. Then came the words, "Stop fighting little men, fight a real man." 5 seconds later, the loudest man in the world went completely silent. And nobody in that room ever forgot what happened next. The night everything changed. It was November 1971. A private charity event inside a mansion in the Hollywood Hills. The kind of party where powerful people gathered behind closed doors. Movie producers, famous athletes, TV executives, the rich and powerful. And at the center of attention, as usual, was the heavyweight champion of the world. He wasn't just a champion. He was bigger than boxing. He was bigger than sports. He was a global icon. Everywhere he went, energy changed. People moved around him like planets around the sun. That night, he controlled the room. Laughing, talking, joking, performing. Everyone listened. Everyone watched. Because when he entered a room, nobody could ignore him. The other man in the room. But across that same room stood someone very different. No entourage. No noise. No attention-seeking. Just one quiet man standing near the bar holding a glass of water. Small frame. Sharp eyes. Calm posture. Completely still. Most people barely noticed him. That was their mistake. Because the quiet man in the corner was unlike anyone in that room. He had speed no camera could properly capture. Explosive power. Unbelievable timing. He moved with a level of precision that made trained fighters uncomfortable. Serious martial artists already knew. This wasn't an actor pretending to fight. This was the real thing. Danger in human form. The champion had heard the name before. A few people mentioned him. A martial arts teacher. A fast fighter. Someone who trained actors. That was about it. To him, this was just another smaller man in a room full of smaller men. And he loved moments like this. Loved the cameras. Loved the attention. Loved making people laugh. Then someone pointed toward the quiet man. A grin appeared. He saw opportunity. A joke. A moment. And he started walking. The room slowly noticed. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Every eye followed him. Straight toward the quiet man. Now understand this. When the heavyweight champion walked toward you in 1971, it felt like a storm moving in your direction. Power. Presence. Confidence. He was 6 feet 3 inches. Over 220 pounds. Fast enough to embarrass world-class fighters. Strong enough to hurt anyone. And he knew it. The quiet man watched him approach. No fear. No movement. No reaction. He didn't shift his feet. Didn't change expression. Just watched. Like he already knew exactly what was coming. Then they stood face to face. One giant. One much smaller. The room held its breath. The champion smiled. That famous smile. Confident. Sharp. Dangerous. Then he placed his hand on the smaller man's shoulder. Heavy. Deliberate. A silent message. I'm bigger than you. And we both know it. Then he spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. When are you going to stop fighting little men, and fight a real man? Laughter filled the room. Some laughed hard. Others didn't. Because some people suddenly felt something shift. Something strange. Something dangerous. The smaller man looked down at the hand on his shoulder. Then slowly looked back up. His voice was calm. Soft. Controlled. Almost gentle. He said, "You're the fastest heavyweight alive." The champion grinned. Then the smaller man continued. "But your hand has been on my shoulder for 3 seconds." Silence. Then, if I wanted it gone, it would already be gone. No anger. No emotion. Just truth. The room froze. The champion stopped smiling. Not angry. Just curious now. Interested. For the first time. Fully focused. Then it happened. And nobody saw it. Not the bodyguards. Not the reporters. Not the guests. Nobody. 1 second. The hand was on his shoulder. The next second? Everything changed. Suddenly the champion's wrist was locked in midair. Frozen. Controlled. Completely immobilized. No dramatic movement. No loud impact. No warning. Just instant control. The impossible had happened. And the room went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The champion looked at his own hand. Confused. Then serious. He tried pulling back. Nothing. He tried rotating his wrist. Nothing. He flexed his arm. Nothing. The grip wasn't violent. But it was absolute. 5 seconds passed. 5 long seconds. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The biggest, strongest man in the room was completely trapped by the smallest. And then something unbelievable happened. The champion laughed. Not fake laughter. Real laughter. Deep laughter. Genuine respect. Because for the first time in a very long time, he had felt something unexpected. Someone had surprised him. Then everything changed. The tension disappeared. The champion pulled him into a hug. Smiling. Laughing. Respect replacing ego. He reportedly whispered, "You're the only little man I'd never fight." The smaller man smiled. Then quietly replied, "And you're the only big man I'd be careful with." The room relaxed. But something had changed forever. Everyone there knew they had just witnessed something rare. Two masters recognizing each other. Not through words. Not through titles. Through ability. They sat together. Just the two of them. Water on the table. Noise all around. Yet locked into deep conversation. After some time, the champion leaned forward. His expression serious now. No jokes. No performance. Just honesty. He asked the question everyone wanted answered. "Could you really fight someone like me?" The smaller man didn't answer immediately. He thought. Then finally spoke. He said something remarkable. "In your world, boxing rules, you win. Simple. Honest. Respectful." Then he continued. But outside the ring, the champion's expression changed. The smaller man's voice became colder. More serious. No gloves. No rounds. No rules. He leaned forward. "That fight ends in seconds." Silence. The champion stared. Listening carefully. Then came words that stayed with him forever. "A street fight doesn't last 12 rounds. Pause. It lasts 4 seconds." He continued. "Size matters less than speed. Power matters less than timing. The first strike matters most." Then he looked directly into his eyes. "Before you throw your first punch, pause. I would already be behind you." That landed hard. Because the champion understood speed better than anyone. And what he heard wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. Then the champion said 2 words. 2 simple words. But they changed everything. "Show me." Not a challenge. Not an insult. A genuine request. "Show me." The smaller man nodded. Both stood up. They walked outside. Into the backyard. No cameras. No crowd. No noise. Just darkness. Pool lights. Cold air. And 2 legends alone. The champion moved first. A jab. Fast. Sharp. Clean. Missed. Nothing there. Second jab. Missed again. Then a right hand. Hard. Explosive. Again. Nothing. The smaller man moved differently. Not just fast. Earlier. Like he moved before punches were fully thrown. Like he could read movement before it happened. The champion attacked again. And again. Nothing landed. Not once. Then came the final moment. The champion rushed forward, using size and strength. Trying to grab him. Trying to overpower him. The smaller man shifted. Pivoted. Redirected everything. The giant stumbled forward. Off balance. Exposed. Then he felt it. One finger. Lightly touching the base of his skull. The most dangerous point. The quiet voice spoke behind him. "That's 3. Silence. On the street. Pause. You don't get up." The champion froze. He understood. Completely. Later that night, they sat together for hours. Talking about speed. Fear. Pain. Greatness. Loneliness. 2 men from different worlds. Yet somehow the same. Both misunderstood. Both extraordinary. Both carrying burdens nobody else could understand. Years later, when tragedy struck and the martial artist was gone, the champion never forgot that night. When asked about the greatest martial artist ever, he didn't joke. Didn't smile. Didn't perform. He simply said, "That little brother moved like God was his choreographer." And maybe that says everything. Because this story was never really about who would win. It was about something much rarer. 2 legends. 2 warriors. 2 men who spent their lives being unmatched. Finally meeting someone who understood them. Some men are so dangerous. The only thing that scares them is meeting their equal. And that night, they did. The silence in that backyard felt unreal. Not because something violent had happened, but because something impossible had just happened. For the first time in his life, the greatest heavyweight on earth stood in front of someone he couldn't touch. Not once. Not even close. And that truth hit harder than any punch ever could. The giant stood there breathing heavily, trying to process what had just happened. 3 attempts. 3 failures. 0 contact. That didn't make sense. Not to a man who had spent his life making legends fall. The smaller fighter stepped back, calm as ever. No celebration. No pride. No arrogance. Just silence. That silence said everything. The heavyweight slowly lowered his hands. Then he looked down at his own fists. Those fists had crushed champions. Those fists had broken jaws. Those fists had terrified men before the bell even rang. Yet tonight, they felt useless. Finally, he spoke. Quietly. Almost to himself. I've never seen anything like that. The smaller man nodded. His voice was calm. You're fighting with rules. The heavyweight looked up. The smaller fighter continued. You fight in distance, rhythm, timing. Then he pointed toward his chest. I fight in moments. That line stayed in the air. The heavyweight frowned. What does that mean? The answer came instantly. It means the fight is decided before most men realize it has started. The heavyweight stared. He understood speed. He understood reaction. He understood instincts. But this felt different. This felt deeper. Like there was another layer to fighting he had never explored. And for a man who believed he understood combat better than anyone alive, that realization was unsettling. The pool light reflected across both men. 2 warriors. Different worlds. Different bodies. Different systems. Same greatness. The heavyweight slowly sat down on the edge of the stone patio. His elbows rested on his knees. His breathing began to settle. Then he asked the real question. The question buried underneath all the others. You think you could really beat me? No smile. No joke. No performance. Just honesty. The smaller fighter didn't answer right away. He looked at the dark lawn. Then at the stars. Then back at the heavyweight. In boxing? He shook his head. No. The heavyweight gave a slight smile. But the smaller fighter wasn't finished. Outside boxing. His voice lowered. That's different. The smile faded. Again. The heavyweight listened carefully. Why? The answer was simple. Because I wouldn't fight your strength. A pause. I'd destroy your balance. Another pause. I'd attack what makes you dangerous before you use it. The heavyweight felt chills. Because deep down, he understood exactly what that meant. The smaller fighter wasn't talking about trading blows. He was talking about ending a fight before power mattered. That was terrifying. Not because it sounded impossible, but because he had just experienced it. For the next hour, they sat together outside. Talking. No cameras. No reporters. No audience. Just 2 dangerous men discussing violence like philosophers. They talked about speed. About reaction. About fear. About discipline. About the mental side of combat. The heavyweight admitted something few ever heard. You know what makes men lose? The smaller fighter looked interested. The answer came. They lose before the first punch. The smaller fighter smiled. Yes. He agreed immediately. Most fights are decided in the mind. That connection changed everything. Suddenly they weren't boxer and martial artist anymore. They were 2 men who understood something very few people ever would. They understood pressure. They understood danger. They understood what it meant to carry power. And they understood loneliness. Because being the best is lonely. Very lonely. Nobody relates to you. Nobody truly understands what you carry. Everyone admires greatness. Very few understand its cost. That's why this meeting mattered. It wasn't about who wins. It never was. It was about recognition. Meeting someone who sees the world through the same lens. Hours passed. The party inside had nearly ended. Music faded. Guests left. But those 2 stayed locked in conversation. They talked about race. About struggle. About how the world treated men who refused to fit inside its expectations. One was too bold. Too loud. Too powerful. The other was too different. Too foreign. Too underestimated. Yet both had forced the world to notice them. The heavyweight said something unforgettable. They fear what they can't control. The smaller fighter nodded. That's why control yourself first. Another powerful silence. They both smiled. Because both men understood. Real power wasn't violence. Real power was control. Control of emotion. Control of fear. Control of movement. Control of self. That was the deeper truth. As dawn approached, both men stood. The sky was beginning to brighten. Their conversation had changed something. Not just in the moment. But deeply. The heavyweight pulled the smaller fighter into one final embrace. This time it felt different. Not playful. Not dramatic. Respect. Pure respect. Then came words nobody expected. The heavyweight looked him in the eyes and said, "You're dangerous." A pause. Then a smile. "The dangerous kind." The smaller fighter smiled back. "So are you." Then they walked back inside. The party was over. But something much bigger had happened that night. A bond had formed. Not through fighting, but through understanding. Years later, the world changed. One legend kept fighting, winning, losing, becoming immortal. The other was gone far too soon. His death shocked the world. Only 32 years old. A genius gone in an instant. When the heavyweight heard the news, people around him noticed something strange. He went completely silent. No jokes. No poetry. No bold statements. Just silence. Long silence. Finally, he spoke. Only a few words. Not him. Then he stared into nothing. As if a part of him had disappeared too. Years later, during an interview, someone asked him a simple question. "Who was the greatest martial artist you ever saw?" There was no hesitation. No performance. No showmanship. He answered immediately. "That little man moved like something I've never seen." Then he smiled softly. And I don't say that about anybody. That says everything. Because this story isn't about proving who would win. That question misses the point. The real story is far more powerful. Two of the most dangerous men alive met. One ruled boxing. The other mastered movement itself. And when they finally stood face to face, they didn't become enemies. They became equals. Some men spend their entire lives being unmatched, feared, respected, untouchable. But every once in a while, they meet someone who changes that. Someone who makes them feel something unfamiliar. Not fear. Recognition. Because the only thing more powerful than greatness is meeting another soul who understands it. And sometimes, that becomes the most important meeting of your life. What do you think? Could anyone really touch either of these legends in their prime? And who do you think was faster? Comment below.